Satoru Gojo isn't just a character, he's a cultural phenomenon. He's a meme. When he showed up, he didn't just change Jujutsu Kaisen, he broke anime itself. Because suddenly every fight, every villain, and every so-called strongest character had one problem. Gojo existed now. And yeah, I know it wasn't that long ago I used a similar title to this, but let's be honest, it's true. You know the trope of the powerhouse, the aura farmer? It's been around forever. But Jujutsu Kaisen took that trope and pulled it off in a way that's never really been done before. Think of the great aura farmers of anime history. How many of these characters were side characters? Piccolo, Vegeta, Madara, Itachi, Aizen, they all are or were main villains. Genu, Light, Meliodas, they were leads. So that leaves us with guys like Zoro, Killua, Levi, and Escanor. Here's what makes Gojo different. We meet him immediately. This dude is sitting on the big bad of the series in his first appearance. 3 of those other guys don't even pop up for at least half a season, and Zoro, his debut is being tied to a post. With Gojo, he's epic immediately. They don't wait for the slow build, they throw him at you instantly, flex his aura, and then peel back the layers of his character as time goes on. He hooks you right away, while the careful spacing of his appearances keeps him from being overexposed. But there's a reason why shows don't usually do this. At the start of a story, you are still establishing your world, your characters, and your tone. If you introduce an aura farmer too early, it can change the entire perception of a series. If you add stakes you never live up to again, Goblin Slayer, that can undermine the whole anime. Escanor doesn't work the same way if he's introduced in episode 1. It's the build-up beforehand that makes his appearance shocking. To introduce someone that broken from episode 1 requires ridiculous balance. You need the audience to think this guy is special and this is not the norm. That's what Gojo is, the perfect balance, which is fitting because that's a core principle of Buddhism, something that Gojo's character draws clear inspiration from. I mean, his "I alone am the honored one" line comes straight from Buddhist scripture on enlightenment, which is literally what Satoru means. It seems like since then, other anime have taken notice too. More and more big shonen are dropping their powerhouse characters early. Makima in Chainsaw Man, Engine in Gachiakuta, Mina in Kaiju number 8. And I'd bet this trend only becomes more common as creators inspired by JJK start building their own stories. But let's be honest, what really made the JJK anime take off? Gojo's domain expansion. I mean, check IMDb, my anime list, Reddit, wherever you want. Prior to that episode, interest in the series was either stagnating or decreasing. Then that episode hits, and the engagement shot up 100% in a single week. Hell, even Trash Taste said no one talked about it until that episode. And then, it happened again in episode 20, which guess what? That was another Gojo episode. He is why JJK's popularity skyrocketed. Look, side characters being fan favorites isn't new, but tell me another time where a side character and his power was the primary reason for the popularity of arguably the biggest anime on Earth. Seriously, there's nothing else like it. He absolutely broke the traditional thinking behind what made anime successful. The only one I can think of that kinda fits is Escanor, and even that is on a much smaller scale. And let's be real, is there any character in the last decade who has broken through to the mainstream more than Gojo? The memes, the drip, the one-liners, the cosplays. Dude has transcended the medium. Hell, he's even kickstarted the modern Madara Aizen debate against Sukuna. Just look at the data. Out of my anime list's top 30 characters of all time, there's exactly one created in the last decade. Satoru Gojo at number 16. Every character above him has existed at least twice as long. The next closest of the last decade is number 33, and that character was a cultural phenomenon in her own right. 02. Oh, and just for fun, Yuji, the actual protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen, is ranked 113. But despite all this, it takes even more to be worthy of being said to break a medium. You must be able to back up the flash with substance, with characterization. You can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And I can say without a doubt, Gojo does that because his character is fascinating. To understand Gojo, you need to understand how his upbringing shaped him. He was not only born into one of the big 3 families in the JJK world, he was the first in generations to have both the limitless technique, an ability that that allows him to control space, and the Six Eyes, which is kind of like a combination of being able to see and analyze anything related to cursed energy instantly. Sound OP? They are, so much so that when he was born, a bounty over 100 million was put on his head. Hell, curses basically hide because he exists. Being born strong, he built his identity around being such. But there's more to it than that. It disillusioned him, it made him cocky. It hindered his ability to form connections with others because he struggled to separate self and strength, not only for him, but for others. In a way, he never really grew up because he assumed only people who were strong could ever understand him, a childish notion, but one that makes sense for his character because he never really had a childhood. Because his identity is so wrapped up in being the strongest, it's why you kind of see him lose it a bit when he defeats strong opponents. It's affirming to him. It proves he is what everyone says he is. Which is why his fight with Toji is so fitting thematically, because Toji has no powers at all. He is Gojo's polar opposite, a man who left his clan due to being rejected by his peers. So when he faces Gojo, the most powerful sorcerer in the world, he is extra motivated to defeat everything he wishes he was, and plans accordingly. This is a monumental moment in Gojo's life. Pretty much every part of his story ties back to this fight, either directly or indirectly. Remember, Gojo is cocky. He thinks he can do anything himself. He loses to Toji because he underestimates him and nearly ends up dying. But you could argue there is a death inside him, one of ego. He didn't just survive, he essentially cracked the code to his powers, and the limitless potential he sees affirms he is the strongest. So when he returns to face Toji again, he holds no grudges, he's transcended. He says, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one." And you can take this so many different ways. This is obviously referring to enlightenment, but is that all? Is it also referring to how alone he is in the world? Is there more? I'm guessing there's more. Another interesting element of this is that specific music is playing during this. The last time we heard it, Gojo was playing with his friends. Now, fast forward through a lot of his trauma. Rico dying, Gojo almost dying, Gato getting his ass kicked, all happening in quick succession, but because Gojo figured out his powers, we see him floating like he's high, and that same music is playing, likening this current feeling, despite everything that happened, to the feeling he had spending time with his friends. It's an interesting and complicated implication. Something else that makes this fight so good is Toji himself says, "Something feels off," but the opportunity to defeat the strongest sorcerer, as a non-sorcerer, is too great to pass up. He can't set his pride aside, and it costs him his life. And there's this really cool symbolism here between an enlightened one reciting lines from Buddha, Gojo, facing a prideful monkey, Toji, referring to Journey to the West. There are obvious consequences to this fight that I'll talk about throughout the rest of this video, but there are subtle ones too. Though we see these scenes out of order, in Season 1, Gojo walks over some ants. There are two reasons this is important. First, he's walking by in the middle of a conversation about falling in line, and symbolically, that means he's rebelling. Second, he walks over the ants, but nothing happens to them. In his fight with Toji, he learns that Toji intentionally misled him to tire him out using his ability all the time, and he used Gojo's footprints, among other things, to track him. So because of the trauma of that incident, and to avoid that ever happening again, Gojo has his ability on 100% of the time, leaving no gaps in his defense and no footprints. I touched on it in my last video, but a hallmark of Gojo's character is one you might not expect. He's incredibly lonely. His missions? He does them alone. Hobbies? None. He's described as unfaithful to women, which totally tracks with the fact that he trusts no one and keeps people at a distance because they don't make him feel safe. At one point, he outright states that Gato is his only friend. But that's another consequence of that Toji fight. Gojo and Gato's friendship crumbles partially because of Toji killing a girl they were supposed to protect, Riko, and the response from other non-sorcerers to that, which disillusioned Gato to all humans without powers. Gato gets a lot of focus when talking about letting Riko decide her fate, but we have to remember that was Gojo's idea. He makes it clear on multiple occasions that kids should be kids and enjoy their childhood, even with Megami after he fought Toji. and that's because he never had one of his own. He was propped up as the entity of strength to the point he wasn't even seen as a person. Remember, from day one, he had a bounty on his head. He spent his entire life feeling unsafe. That's why when Gojo didn't treat him like everyone else, they were able to bond so quickly and powerfully. Together they say, "We are the strongest." Almost all of the moments in the series he's vulnerable are related to Gojo, which is also why after they've gone their separate ways, he's completely on his own. He has no equals, no friends, no one who views him for him, but only as the strongest. Gojo knew this, which is why when they have their breakup at a KFC, he says, "Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest?" For Gojo, this is an identity crisis. This actually comes back later when he's sealed in the prison realm. Gojo's reflection is faceless, representing his lack of identity. Back to Gojo, the "we are the strongest" line no longer applies. He is the strongest. It couldn't be more fitting, because going from we to he also refers to that loneliness of his. It also explains why he's a fan of Digimon, because that totally tracks with his personality. An anime about going to another world with your friends and bonding with monsters. Yeah, that tracks. Their differing perspectives on their breakup tells us a lot about each of them too. In Gojo's perspective, it's bright out. It might even be a normal day. When we see it from Gojo's perspective, it's the darkest day of his life, and I think this highlights the importance of their relationship to him. When Gojo has a chance to kill Gojo, and he knows he should, he can't, because he loves the dude. Sure, they got into dick measuring contests frequently, but that's what he wants out of a friend. He viewed Gojo as an equal. He was able to let his guard down. He didn't need the goofy facade he always put up. At the beach, when his ability has been on non-stop, he said, "It's fine, you're here." Gojo, in a way no one else has done, made Gojo feel safe. That's why we get a goofier version of Gojo for a lot of the main series. It's a facade to protect himself, but the truth is, you can only protect those who want to be protected. Just like Gojo could never be happy because he had two conflicting desires within him, Gojo is trapped with his own conflict. He can't separate his worth from his strength. That flaw impacts his goals. He dreams of creating a new generation to be one that can defend themselves, but as equals. That way the burden doesn't fall on one person, like it has for him. But Gojo and Toji aren't the only characters worth mentioning in regard to Gojo. Something I thought was interesting is that Yuji and Yuta, the two students Gojo you could really call a mentor to, both represent different parts of him. For Yuta, it's sharing in loneliness and in great strength. But for Yuji, it's the child within, which makes it fitting that this is the version we spend the story following, the positive element. Oh, and there's another, Sukuna. For as different as they feel, there are so many parallels between these two. Both of them reject authority, find solace in strength, and that strength isolated them from others. The difference is how they act upon it. Gojo rejects authority because he wants to reform it. Sukuna rejects it and wants to destroy it. Where Gojo's isolation led to the loneliness I've talked about earlier and created inner conflicts within him, Sukuna feels nothing of the sort. He lacks the human connectivity and emotional elements that play such a large role in Gojo's story. Sukuna has shown no care whatsoever about identity. There is no facade with him. His shackles are purely physical in that he's trapped with Yuji, but his mind is free and secure. Remember the high Gojo felt after the Toji fight? That's Sukuna all the time. It's funny because we know Gojo values teaching, but he does it because of his humanity. Meanwhile, despite Sukuna completely lacking in humanity, we see a little of that from him too. With Yuji, Megami, and even Jogo, we see hints of teaching moments. Even their abilities are polar opposites. Gojo's abilities embody his will to protect and preserve. Literally, his ability can keep people from being touched. Meanwhile, Sukuna's is all about cutting down what's in front of him to get what he wants. He embodies destruction. These two guys are the pinnacle of strength in the series, but their interpretations on how to act on it are so different. And it is inevitable that these two will eventually clash, and I'd be willing to bet, based on how the story has gone, that Gojo's fight with Toji will play an important role in the Sukuna fight in one way or another. And who knows, maybe he'll break anime again. Now subscribe or die.